Long ago, under the gaze of mountains so tall they seemed to touch the heavens, there lived a young prince. His name was Saif-ul-Mulook, a prince of Persia, born into privilege and surrounded by wealth. Yet, despite the riches of his father's court, the gardens heavy with roses, the fountains singing with crystal water, the glittering halls lined with silk, Saif felt restless. There was a quiet longing inside him, a yearning for something beyond the marble walls and golden ceilings. One night, as he slept beneath a silver lantern, he dreamed. In that dream, he saw her. A woman, no, not a woman, but a fairy queen of such beauty that the world seemed to hold its breath. Her name was whispered on the winds of sleep, Badi-ul-Jamal. Her eyes shimmered like pools of starlight. Her hair cascaded like a river of night. And her presence, it was as though the very soul of the universe had chosen to take form before him. Saif woke with his heart pounding. He could not let go of the vision. And perhaps you, dear listener, know the feeling, when a dream lingers, refusing to fade with the light of day. Perhaps you've had dreams that feel like a calling, that tug at your chest long after you open your eyes. Days passed, yet the dream clung to him. Saif sought out wise men, sages, and mystics, asking about the fairy he had seen. Many dismissed him with gentle smiles. After all, what prince chases dreams? But one old sage, his beard white as snow upon the mountains, looked into Saif's eyes and said softly, "Your dream is no ordinary dream. What you saw was Badi-ul-Jamal, queen among the fairies. She lives in the high valleys of the Himalayas, where mountains cradle a hidden lake. Many have sought her, but few return." The sage's words only deepened Saif's longing. He felt as though his heart had been bound to this unseen fairy by threads stronger than steel. And so, he made his decision. He would leave the palace, the comforts of his father's kingdom, and journey into the unknown to seek this queen of dreams. Saif's path was long, winding through deserts of golden sand and valleys lush with emerald forests. He traveled across rivers whose waters roared like lions and through towns where storytellers sat by fires, spinning legends late into the night. But all the while, the image of Badi-ul-Jamal guided him, her eyes, her voice, her very presence. Sometimes, while resting beneath the stars, Saif would wonder aloud, "Am I chasing love, or am I chasing illusion? And if it is illusion, does that make it any less worthy of pursuit?" And perhaps you, too, have asked yourself such questions. Dreams can feel foolish, but they give us direction, like stars guiding lost travelers. At last, Saif reached the valleys of the north, where the air grew thin and crisp, where peaks rose like mighty guardians, their crowns cloaked in snow. Here, nature seemed alive with whispers. The wind carried secrets, and the rivers hummed with songs too ancient to understand. It was in these valleys that Saif encountered beings not of this world. Jinns who drifted like shadows, guardians of the mountains who tested travelers with riddles and trials. One jinn, dark as obsidian, appeared before him and said, "Turn back, Prince of Persia. The fairy queen is not for mortal men. Your heart will break before you touch her hand." But Saif, steady as the moon's light, replied, "Even if my heart breaks, I would rather it break in pursuit of her than remain whole in ignorance." The jinn vanished, leaving behind only the echo of a hollow laugh. The journey of Saif had been long, so very long. He had walked through valleys where the sun itself seemed reluctant to enter, past ridges where the wind howled with voices older than memory. Nights had been cold, biting at his resolve, and yet each dawn, a faint warmth, like a whisper from his dreams, pulled him forward. At last, after trials and endless wandering, his steps carried him to a place the sage had spoken of. A place whispered of in hushed tones, where earth seemed to pause in reverence. There it lay before him, hidden like a jewel between towering peaks, the lake of Saif-ul-Mulook. The mountains encircled it like silent guardians, their white crowns gleaming beneath a solemn moon. Shadows stretched down their slopes, painting the valley in shades of silver and indigo. The air was cool, sharp with the scent of stone and pine, yet softened by a quiet so profound it seemed as though even time itself had chosen to rest. Saif stood motionless at the edge, his weary heart suddenly filled with stillness. The waters, the waters, were unlike anything he had ever seen. They lay before him like a mirror polished by eternity, so still that not even the faintest ripple disturbed their surface. In that glassy expanse, the heavens themselves had descended. Stars floated in the lake, each point of light trembling with the gentlest shimmer, as though the cosmos had chosen to rest upon the earth for just this night. It was as if earth and sky had ceased their ancient dance and joined as one. He gazed into the lake, and for a moment, he felt he had slipped into a dream. Perhaps he had. Perhaps his long journey had worn him so thin that reality had become fragile, and what he saw was nothing more than the lingering fire of his own longing. Yet the night was too real, the silence too vast, the stars too sharp against the velvet sky. No, this was no dream. Saif's breath caught in his chest. His eyes searched the expanse of water, and then he saw her. At first, she was no more than a suggestion in the mist. A soft shimmer upon the air, where moonlight clung more thickly. The mist rose gently from the lake, pale and luminous, curling like silken threads. Within them, a form began to take shape. And then, she was there. Badi-ul-Jamal. The very same whose image had haunted his dreams, whose presence had drawn him across deserts, through mountains, and into the heart of mystery itself. Her beauty was beyond words, beyond imagination. She was not of this earth as mortals know it. Her presence was like dawn breaking after endless night, a warmth and radiance that could not be contained by human thought. She was clothed in light itself. Not harsh, not blinding, but soft, like the first rays of morning filtered through clouds, like gold poured over silk. Around her shimmered hues of silver, as though the stars had bent low to weave her garment. Her hair cascaded like rivers of darkness, yet even within that darkness glimmered faint sparks, as though fragments of the night sky had become trapped within her tresses. Her eyes, when they opened, were deep as eternity, luminous as twin moons, filled with the wisdom of 1,000 lifetimes and the innocence of a child who had never seen sorrow. Saif fell to his knees. Not from weakness, not from exhaustion, but from awe. There are moments when the soul is so overwhelmed that the body can do nothing else but yield. This was such a moment. The prince, who had crossed kingdoms, who had faced jinns and storms, who had endured hunger and thirst, now knelt like a child before something greater than any kingdom, greater than any victory. He tried to speak, but no words came. His lips parted, yet only the soft whisper of his breath escaped, mingling with the mist. What words could exist for such a sight? What language could hold the shape of a dream made flesh? The lake was silent, as though it too held its breath. Even the wind seemed reluctant to stir, fearful that the gentlest sigh might break this fragile moment. The mountains watched, immovable, witnesses to a union written in the stars. Badi-ul-Jamal's gaze fell upon Saif. And though the distance between them was vast, though he stood upon the shore and she upon the heart of the lake, he felt as though she saw him completely. Not just his form, not just his face, but the entirety of his being. His fears, his trials, his hopes, his longing, all laid bare in that single glance. He thought of his journey, the nights when he doubted, the days when the path seemed endless, the voices that told him he sought an illusion. And yet here she was. A tear slid down his cheek, warm against the chill of night. "My lady," he whispered, though he knew she might not hear. "I have crossed the world for you." The fairy did not answer in words, not yet. Instead, her presence seemed to ripple across the lake, as though her very being was music, and the waters were her instrument. The stars upon the surface trembled, shimmering with delicate waves of light. Saif bowed his head, trembling with reverence. And in that moment, he wondered, was she real? Or was he simply a dreamer, lost within a vision spun by moonlight and longing? But then, perhaps dreams and reality were not so different. After all, is not love itself a dream we willingly believe? And as you listen now, perhaps you too have stood at the edge of something so vast, so beautiful, that you wondered if it was real. A moment so radiant it felt like a dream you never wished to wake from. And if you have not, then let this story be that dream for you tonight. Let the stars, the lake, and the fairy queen whisper to you in the hush of the night. But their union was not to be simple, for no tale woven of mortals and fairies ever is. Badi-ul-Jamal was not free to walk as she pleased. Her steps were bound by enchantments as old as the mountains themselves. The lake was her sanctuary and her prison both, a place where her beauty shimmered like moonlight on water, yet where unseen chains held her to the realm of the fairies. Around her, unseen but never absent, the jinn lingered, silent sentinels of another world. Their presence was like the chill that lingers even in the warmest fire, like shadows that cling to the edges of a dream. And so, each night, Saif would return. He would stand by the lake as the stars gathered in the dark velvet of the sky, his heart beating to the rhythm of expectation. He waited not with impatience, but with the reverence of a pilgrim waiting at a shrine. For when the mist curled above the still waters, and when the air seemed to hum with a silence deeper than silence itself, she would come. Badi-ul-Jamal appeared as though she were born of the night's own breath. Her light seemed woven of dawn and twilight together, of every first ray of sun and every last shimmer of dusk. And though Saif had dreamed of her before he knew her, no dream could capture the way her laughter danced across the water like ripples, or the way her eyes seemed to hold entire galaxies within them. They spoke, slowly at first, as two strangers testing the fragile bridge of curiosity. He told her of distant lands, of the palaces of Persia and the gardens that bloomed like living carpets. She told him of hidden valleys where fairies gathered, of nights where the sky opened and stars would descend to drink from hidden springs. And between these stories, silence would fall. But it was not an empty silence. It was a silence heavy with meaning, like the pause between two lines of poetry, like the hush before dawn. And so, gently, inevitably, they fell in love. Not as mortals do in sudden fire, nor as fairies do in effortless grace, but as two worlds meeting where they were never meant to meet, slowly, hesitantly, and yet with a force that felt older than destiny. But love, in its purity, rarely comes unchallenged. The jinn grew restless. They had long endured Saif's presence by the lake, whispering among themselves in voices like shifting sand, their eyes glinting from the darkness of the mountains. Some were curious, some indifferent. But one was cruel. He was taller than a man, his form coiling with smoke and shadow, his eyes burning like coals in a dying fire. His voice was like thunder echoing through a cavern, sharp enough to pierce the heart. And when at last his patience broke, he appeared before Saif, his rage filling the night. "She cannot be yours, Saif," he roared, his voice shaking the still waters of the lake. "She belongs to the realm of the fairies. Leave or perish." The air seemed to tremble, and even the stars above dimmed at his words. The lake's calm surface rippled with the force of his anger, breaking the perfect reflection of the heavens. Saif's heart pounded, but his feet did not move. His voice, though quiet, was steady, carrying the weight of every night he had waited, of every breath he had taken at the water's edge, of every dream that had brought him here. "My love is no theft," Saif said, his words soft but unyielding. "My love is devotion. And devotion cannot be broken by threats." Perhaps now, as you listen, you are drifting, your eyes heavy, your breath soft. That's all right. That is how stories like these are meant to be carried, not only in the mind, but in the quiet rhythm of dreams. Love stories like Saif and Badi-ul-Jamal's are not simply tales of people long ago. They are lullabies for the soul, reminders that even in the stillness of night, there is beauty waiting to be found. So rest. Imagine again the still waters of the lake, wide and endless beneath the sky. See how the stars ripple across its surface, shimmering as though they are no longer far above, but floating within reach of your fingertips. Every star a thought, every ripple a memory, spreading wider and wider until they fade into silence. Imagine the hush of the mountains, ancient, unmoving, wrapped in shadows. They are guardians of secrets too old for words, keepers of dreams too deep for waking minds. Their silence is not empty. It is alive. It breathes. It listens. It cradles you as you listen, just as it cradled Saif when he stood at the lake, waiting night after night. And as you imagine this silence, notice how it settles inside you too. The kind of quiet that loosens all the knots in your chest, the kind of quiet that says, you are safe, you can let go. Perhaps, even now, you are floating in that silence, neither here nor there. Not quite awake, not fully asleep. Somewhere in between. And in that space, the story lingers, not demanding, not pressing, only flowing, like the gentle rhythm of waves against the shore. It is in such places, I think, that we realize how small we are, and yet how vast our hearts can be. Saif learned it as he waited by the lake. Badi-ul-Jamal learned it as she reached for a love forbidden by her world. And perhaps you too are learning it now, in the quiet of your own night. That love, in all its forms, makes us both small and infinite at once. And as you breathe, slowly, softly, imagine the story continuing, not in words, but in dreams. Imagine walking along the water's edge, the moonlight guiding your steps. Imagine seeing Saif in the distance, waiting patiently, his eyes fixed on the mist that rises from the lake. Imagine hearing the faint laughter of Badi-ul-Jamal, like wind chimes stirred by a breeze. Stay there as long as you like. The story is not rushing you. The night is not rushing you. You have all the time in the world. The tale of Saif-ul-Mulook and Badi-ul-Jamal has many endings, depending on who tells it. Around village fires, storytellers weave one ending. In quiet corners of mountain valleys, travelers whisper another. Some say Saif defeated the jinn, his courage greater than their fire, his love brighter than their darkness, and that he carried his beloved across the water's edge, into the mortal world, where they lived and loved until their last breath. Others say differently. They say that Saif was never meant to return, that his fate was bound to the lake from the moment he dreamed of her. That he walked into the mist one night, chasing the golden shimmer of Badi-ul-Jamal, and never emerged again. That his shadow still lingers on the shore, waiting, watching, unyielding as the centuries pass. But perhaps, dear listener, perhaps the truth lies not in endings, but in journeys. Endings are heavy things. Journeys are softer. Journeys are alive. A journey is a devotion. A willingness to step forward into mystery, not knowing what lies beyond. And that is what Saif gave. His love was not a possession to be held, not a crown to be worn, not a treasure to be locked away. It was a quest, a breathing vow, a light carried into the unknown. And so, even now, as the stars lean over the quiet lake, their reflections rippling on the water's skin, the story lingers. It is whispered by the waters when they kiss the stones on the shore. It is carried by the winds as they sweep down from the peaks. It is remembered by the mountains, older than time itself, who watched Saif kneel in awe when he first beheld her. And if you listen closely, if you let your breathing slow, you may hear it too. Not in words, but in the hush between them. Not in sound, but in the way silence itself feels alive. Perhaps tonight, as you drift into sleep, you too will walk beside that lake. The air will be cool and silvered with moonlight. The stars will float on the water as though they are lanterns waiting to guide you. And there, by the edge of the shore, you may hear a laugh, light and bright, like the shimmer of bells, Badi-ul-Jamal's laughter, carried across the stillness. Or perhaps you will hear footsteps. Slow, steady, unwavering. The steps of a prince who refused to give up, even when the world told him he must. You may not see him clearly, but you will feel the strength in his presence, the warmth of his devotion. And in dreams you may walk beside him. Rest now. You do not need to know the ending. The story is not asking for answers. The night is not demanding anything of you. All it asks is that you breathe, and drift, and let yourself be carried where dreams wish to take you. The night is long. The stars are gentle. And dreams are waiting.